Hey everyone, this is Paul Gale from paulgalenetwork.com, and thank you for joining me today for video game news. It is September 14th, 2021, and these are the top stories of the day. To kick things off, happy 20th anniversary to the Nintendo GameCube, as it released on this day, September 14th, 20 years ago, back in 2001, first in Japan, and then later on, November 18th in North America, and other territories to follow. Nintendo put up on Twitter today, the Nintendo GameCube system and the scary good times of Luigi's Mansion debuted in Japan 20 years ago today. What are some of your favorite memories with both? And here's a full look at that. I loved the Nintendo GameCube. I still have mine hooked up. It's at my parents' house. I have the black model, but I think the purple one was fantastic as well. It later came out in different colors like orange and silver. There were some special editions. The Panasonic had its own iQ Nintendo GameCube model, which was exclusive to Japan, that also played DVD players that had cool lights on it, metallic, shiny. I have a lot of fond memories of the system. It was at my second E3 in 2001, which was June back in the day, where I got to play GameCube for the first time and play Luigi's Mansion as one of its premier games. And that's kind of also where I got my start in the video game industry officially, where I met Mark McDonald and Dan Shu from Electronic Gaming Monthly. And if you've heard my channel, if you've listened to me a while now, you probably know that story. But that's where I met those two from EGM and kept in contact, and eventually got a job working for Gamers.com the following March of 2002. So anyways, a lot of little memories wrapped into that time frame of my life. It was cool, getting ready to start university, and yeah, pretty cool stuff. The system itself, I think its shape is iconic. It was a cube. The color that Nintendo chose to launch with the system, purple being the primary, was bold. The handle on the back was unique. The fact that it was Nintendo's first disc-based system this many years after Sega Saturn, 32X, and PlayStation came out was interesting. Although this was a higher capacity disc than CD, but not quite as high capacity as standard DVD, which is what its main competition in PlayStation 2 and Xbox used. PlayStation 2, which launched ahead, and Xbox the same year as the GameCube. Nintendo continued with their 4 controller ports on the front, had the 2 memory card slots right underneath. It was a powerful system. Nintendo designed it to be small, compact, but strong. And I remember I was working at Electronics Boutique before this console came out, but we already knew from developers, including Nintendo, Sony, and Microsoft, how powerful the machines were. And one of the interesting ways how they were being marketed to consumers was how many polygons could it do? How fast was it? What were the max theoreticals that could be produced on screen at the same time and stuff? And the PlayStation 2 and Xbox numbers were high in the marketing, 170 million polygons and this, 145 million polygons. And then you had Nintendo with like a 7.6 of this, 12.4 of that. And people not in the know were wondering, what is going on? Nintendo polygons that they were talking about were, this is how many fully rendered, optimized polygons with all details, all wrapped around them, can be held on screen at the same time. Whereas the PS2 and Xbox numbers were so big because it was just how many raw, literal, triangular polygons without any effects on screen. It's not that those systems were more powerful. In fact, Nintendo GameCube was easily more powerful than the PlayStation 2, and in some ways more powerful than Xbox. In other ways, Xbox had the edge. Obviously they also used different CPUs and GPUs. Nintendo GameCube was a PowerPC architecture, which was, roughly double of what Pentium 3 was at the time. And, aside from the power, and if you forget about all the technicalities and stuff, what the system did for the industry was pretty cool. It introduced a very different video game controller. A controller that is loved so much in particular for Smash Brothers that Nintendo has decided, let's make this controller work on the Wii, on Wii U, on Nintendo Switch. Yet they have never gone back to their default system having this 4-button layout. The design for the controller layout, why it was so different, what different was Mr. Shigeru Miyamoto wanted, when you're holding the Nintendo GameCube controller, you can easily access any 2 buttons at one time, with the primary button being A. There is no mistake in having to look down and wondering, oh, did I just hit X or am I at B? Or, oh, in order to go from B to Y, I have to jump like this, or from A to X, I have to jump like this. It's just big A in the middle, and to the left is a smaller B, in which case the B was actually originally a curved beam, kind of like Y and X. Y on top, X on the side. If you actually look at the controller up close, sideways, you'll see that they have different levels of height too. Y is not just curved this way as opposed to X like this, but Y is also a thicker button, comes out more. That L and R buttons in the controller were like magic. They depress in. They've got this stopping point and then a click for a secondary function. Really nice. Really good with racing games. Of course, it was used in Super Mario Sunshine well. The ergonomics, the controller itself really felt wonderful in your hands, especially with the L and R. Of course, later on, an updated version of the controller was the Wavebird, in which case I was actually one of the first people in the world to own a Wavebird controller, as I won it in May of 2002 at E3 up on stage playing Mario Party. You had to win a competition down below to become one of 4 final competitors to go up on stage, win that competition, and you walked away with a brand new Wavebird in this nice cool velvet pouch, and that was mine. Yeah, E3s back in the day were May. So 2000, 2001, 2002, these early E3s were May. So here I am, attending my university classes, and I come back home with a Wavebird. Pretty awesome. The controller, I love it. A couple of things that maybe weren't the best at the time, that definitely, if they ever brought this controller back, I have ideas of how it would work better today. But one, that left D-pad, the only D-pad on the system, could have been a little bit bigger. It worked fine for me as I played a lot of Capcom versus SNK2 EO on the system, but having a bigger D-pad would be better. That right C-stick, I actually like it, but probably a little bit bigger and a little bit different of a top, so it feels more comfortable, less likely to slip from people's thumbs. At the time, only having that one Z button was all that was deemed necessary, but if you were to update it, having 2. In fact, I think the perfect controller from a grip and functionality standpoint would be kind of like a marriage between the Nintendo Switch Pro controller and the Nintendo GameCube controller. Ergonomic grip between the two, but closer to the GameCube side. But texturized portions, kind of like how the Pro controller has, where you could feel that it's different for that part. You would keep the L and R like they are on Nintendo Switch, but you would make ZL and ZR these 2 Nintendo GameCube L and R buttons. So you could have these triggers down here and the quicker buttons to access right here. Make the triggers still have their dual functionality. Okay. Analog stick, somewhere in between GameCube and Pro Controller analog stick. D-pad, the same size as the Pro Controller, but a little bit better, a little bit more accurate when it comes to up, down, left, right, and then the 4 diagonals. The C button, keep it yellow. I like that C stick being yellow, but keep it the same size, make it the same size as the left analog stick. And there you go. Now, final part, what about the 4 face buttons? Because that's important. Released 2 models of this new Nintendo controller. One with the 4 face button layout that Nintendo has designed and has remained present on every console's controller ever since. You know, having X, A, B, Y. Keep that present, because that works for a majority of games, majority of titles, third-party titles, crossover stuff. You've got it. But also include this one. And I don't think you would have one that would sell so poorly that it wouldn't be worth manufacturing. I think a lot of fans would love this old school feeling, but in a new school convention, and have, amiibo support, motion control support, perhaps a head jack for a microphone in it. That would be the only thing new that you'd have to have that neither of the controllers currently have. And you have your, evolution of the Pro Controller with its current 4 face button layout, and there you go. I would probably buy both because I would want to use this one for certain types of games and that one for other games, Love the system. Fond memories. I was 18 when it came out, when I purchased mine. It was the first console that I camped out for at launch outside the Target. Got there early in the morning, was one of the first 3 people in line, sleeping bag and stuff. Luigi's Mansion was a great game. It spawned, sequel and Luigi's Mansion 3, going 3DS, Nintendo Switch, of course. We got Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3 at launch in the United States, Star Wars Rogue Squadron 2. Ended up being a really nice system with a lot of solid games. It's also an interesting time when it came out because by coming out September 14th in 2001, it was 3 days removed from 9/11, and that was a huge moment in United States history and honestly in the world. It was kind of hard to not be aware of it. It's one of those moments in time where if you were alive when it happened and you're old enough to, be able to watch the news and kind of know what's going on in the world around you, it was unavoidable. It was a sad, horrible day. And here with this economic uncertainty, you had a brand new video game system come out in 3 days. Ooh, just in Japan, a couple months later would be GameCube and Xbox in North America, but still very close to that. But things worked out. Nintendo GameCube went on to selling a little under 22 million, sold a couple 100 million pieces of software, so the ratio was solid. I think the system deserved to sell more. It was actually in 3rd place because in the world, PlayStation 2 was way up ahead, and then you had Xbox and GameCube, and then Xbox ended up with almost 24, GameCube almost 22. Dreamcast at that point was a very distant 4th place system, nowhere near 15 million, unfortunately. But I always felt like, GameCube should have done better. Had some really cool things on it. Beautiful Joe, The Legend of Zelda, The Wind Waker. Great stuff. Of course, it gave us Metroid Prime, Resident Evil 4, Resident Evil 0, Resident Evil Remake. Did I mention Beautiful Joe? Beautiful Joe, another really good game. Soul Calibur 2, the best version. Things kind of got weird, though, after a while, where, despite Metal Gear Solid the Twin Snakes coming out on it, and Eternal Darkness coming out on it, 2 games that were rated mature and did successful numbers, it never got MGS2 or MGS3. No Grand Theft Auto came out. 3, San Andreas, Vice City. Despite Soul Calibur 2 doing best on the platform, it never got Soul Calibur 3. Like, what's up with that? No other Street Fighter came out, despite Capcom vs. SNK2 EO coming out on it. Mortal Kombat was still supported. This was also the first Nintendo system in a while to get some type of Final Fantasy support. Square, Soft, left Nintendo with the SNES. They jumped to PlayStation to develop 7, 8, 9, PS2 to do 10, and then GameCube finally got back. Nintendo and Square got back. Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles, Crystal Bears. When 2 Japanese partners separate, it's done respectfully, and you typically never get back together again. So there was a decent bridge burned between Nintendo and what now would become Square Enix. But they did good, and they made their way back to each other, and nowadays you have healthy support of Square Enix on Nintendo platforms, so it all worked out. But that's a little bit of a look back at Nintendo GameCube. Cool time for me in life because as a gamer, this was that next Nintendo system. I was anticipating this thing since it was codenamed Nintendo Dolphin. I waited up late at night to watch that Space World presentation with that unforgettable demo reel of Luigi's Mansion, seeing Mario 128, Samus running in third-person perspective, which eventually became Prime. That little teaser of Joanna Dark in Perfect Dark, which rumors suggest, reports came to me that the game was looking nice on GameCube before Rare eventually, was sold back to itself as Nintendo owned half, and then Microsoft ended up purchasing the entirety of Rare. That was just a couple $100 million. What a deal. That's another story for another day, how I wish Microsoft handled Rare in the last couple of decades. But hey, you still see them around. They're making Sea of Thieves, and we got Banjo-Kazooie support in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, so it's cool. And they're partnering up with other folks to do Killer Instinct and Battletoads, so it's okay. But as a gamer, I was looking forward to it. Stoked for the launch. Surprised by Wind Waker. Blown away by Resident Evil 4. Some of my favorite games are on the system, like Metroid Prime 1 and 2. It even had a Game Boy player attachment where you stick to the bottom of the system. There's a device that allowed you to play Game Boy games up through GBA. And having Game Boy Advance games on your big screen was kind of like the 2D evolution of Super Nintendo, because N64 and GameCube, most of their games were primarily 3D. So that was kind of nice to have. You could play online with this thing. Not many games went online, but Phantasy Star Online Episode 1 and 2 were the most popular and almost the only ones. Game system had a couple of interesting things, like whether you held a Z button on the controller or 4 Z buttons on 4 controllers at once at the startup, would change the sound. Had a good save design with the memory cards, and whether you bought the memory card 251 or the 59 or the 1019 being the biggest, to hold a lot of files on it. It was quick loading time, great graphics. Some of the games really hold up today really nicely. You look at F-Zero GX, it's still a very pretty, very fast game. I love it. Mario Kart Double Dash, a lot of fun as well. Yeah, good stuff. That was actually a nice little nostalgic trip back. I didn't know I would spend 17 minutes almost talking on Nintendo GameCube, but you know what? It deserved it. And it's also kind of why, unfortunately, we kind of look at it like, for better or worse, it was Nintendo's, at that point, worst selling video game system. It went Nintendo, Super Nintendo, Nintendo 64, Nintendo GameCube. The industry was getting bigger, competition was getting better, more variety was happening. Nintendo, you could say, was always pioneering in some ways of technology with their consoles and with their game development prowess, but using mediums at different times. Like maybe you could have gone back and said, yeah, maybe N64 should have been a CD system, but it wouldn't be the same. Maybe GameCube should have been a DVD system, but maybe it wouldn't be the same. Maybe it would have, but on the flip side, maybe game sales wouldn't have sold well because the thing would have been able to be hacked easier. Proprietary discs, people couldn't just burn them as simple, so you don't have a fake market out there. So maybe you'd have better console sales, but slightly worse game sales. Hard to say. But that's what motivated Nintendo to, boom, spike it up, go Wii, change the gaming industry up. But it was also the last time that they were in that arms race of powerhouse consoles. NES, SNES, N64, GameCube, I would give all four the benefit of the doubt, saying able to produce the best graphics per generation. Until Wii U, Nintendo Switch, not the most powerful systems anymore of their respective gens. But that's okay. We have Nintendo Switch nowadays. Would we have had it if Nintendo was going like this, or if they were going like this prior to Wii? Hard to say. But I love Nintendo Switch, and I think it might end up being the best video game system ever, or at least Nintendo's best ever, which is almost one and the same, at least to some people. Certainly selling very well, right? But, sales talk. We'll get into sales talk later in here, and we go through that quite often throughout the year. But that's my little recap of Nintendo GameCube and why it's special to me as a gamer, as someone who has worked in the video game industry for many years, as an E3 attendee, eventually someone who worked for Gamers.com, OneUp.com, BitMob.com, covering E3 for a decade for those sites, and then eventually for PaulGaleNetwork.com, and being the official E3 Q&A person who went to the show and responded back to every person on the forums all summer long, months and months worth, hundreds and hundreds of questions answered. And all that stuff kind of links back to GameCube days, meeting Charles Martinet for the first time. In the era of GameCube was, meeting Howard Lincoln and Peter Main and Shigeru Miyamoto, Satoru Iwata. Yeah, GameCube special. One of the best controllers to date. Slick design. Still love it. All right. We're going to move on. Happy 20th anniversary, Nintendo GameCube. Let me know what you thought of this segment. Did I go on too long? Or was it just right? And tell me some of your own favorite GameCube memories. Okay. Next up, we got something cool to look at. Rumors suggested that Nintendo was going to price drop the Nintendo Switch, at least in the European markets, and that happened. As of now, if you're in Europe, you could buy the Nintendo Switch for a significant amount less than you could for the last 4.5 years. It's now down to 270 euros from the old 330 euro price point. That's a 60 euro drop. It's something close to $76. That's quite considerable, You're looking at something around 22% of a drop. In the United States, 22% drop, that would be around 69%, $69 I should say, from 300. That would be pretty good, right? If Nintendo had a drop here. Even if Nintendo Switch dropped in the North American markets to $250, $50 would be considerable. But we'll see if that happens here. In the UK, it also dropped down from 280 pounds to 260 pounds. Less of a percentage drop, but still, you're saving over $30 if you're translated to US currency. We'll see if by Black Friday there's a price drop, and the price drop ahead of Black Friday is now the new price going forward of Nintendo Switch and its basic model around the world. Or will they officially price drop it up ahead of the OLED launch? We'll see. Nintendo knows what they're doing. They'll plan it just right. But I'm excited because I think that it's time that Nintendo lowers the base price, and then they have a few different prices that look attractive. $350 for OLED, $250 for Nintendo Switch, and then at some point I think Nintendo Switch Lite has to go to like to $170. Otherwise, there's not enough of a difference between $200 and $250. Going $170, it becomes a lot more attractive. You can't go to $150 because it's about the percentage that it would be dropping. You could go from $300 and drop it $50 to go $250. That's fine. But go to $200 to $150, too big of a drop outright, I think. Then again, I think the systems will eventually get there. And if Nintendo Switch has a long, healthy lifespan, I could see the Nintendo Switch Lite eventually down the line. If Nintendo wants to keep the generation long, get down to $100. If you get that system down to $100 and you're still having a profit margin in it, which will happen as the supply chain and the production gets faster and cheaper, that's an impulse buy. Yeah, new systems are out, PS5, Xbox Series X, maybe Nintendo Switch 2. But for the family that's just jumping into gaming or now has a younger sibling, a younger child that they didn't have several years ago, you've got this library of thousands, over 5,000 games at that point, right? And a lot of them cheaper. Maybe a greatest hits, a player's choice lineup, cheaper games, $100 system. That's going to be attractive. That's an impulse buy. I could buy one or two, or I could buy one and a few games and be okay. So I think that will happen. Will the Nintendo Switch get phased out? We'll see. I think eventually it will. But you can't just drop Switch to $250, sell them all out, and then now have a $200 Lite and a $350 OLED. Because people are like, I don't want this one necessarily, because I want to play on TV, but You mean to tell me I could have just bought it for 300 and now the cheapest entry point is 350 because there is no normal one anymore? So you think, well, maybe drop the OLED to 300. But when? So because you don't want to, bother the people that just bought an OLED. Maybe a year later. So are you looking at maybe keeping around the old Nintendo Switch for a year and then take it off the market and bring OLED down to 300? That would be less aggravating for consumers, but on the same time, people got used to having the ability to buy one for 250, having the mind share that it's there, and then now being taken away. So I wouldn't be convinced necessarily if immediately Nintendo just phased out the Nintendo Switch regular model. And then we have to throw in different topics of, well, is there a Nintendo Switch Plus going to come out eventually? Or will they have just a Nintendo Switch 2? At that point, you're looking at 4 or 5 devices on the market. I think at that point you get too many. I think at that point Nintendo finds a way to reduce it. So 3 or 4 I could see. 5, I don't know if that's going to happen. Because then you have market confusion. And you don't want the devices to compete with each other, right? Not too much. Different prices. They serve different functions. That's okay. Too many of them, not so good. All right. Moving on in video game news today. That was another fun one. I'm having a lot of fun. I always have fun doing these, but today it's like, some extra cool stuff to talk about. All right. So next up, this is a character trailer reveal for Ren and Stimpy. And they are coming to Nickelodeon's upcoming fighting game. All-Star Brawl comes out later this year. The graphics look good. The amount of characters is promising. Many more surprises on the way. Nice models, nice animation coming this fall. Plenty of characters. I talked about this game before. We showed it off on this channel a while ago. Coming to PlayStation 4, PS5, Nintendo Switch, Xbox Series S, X, and One. Pretty cool. Ren and Stimpy, with my glorious muscles, is an IP that I like from back in the day. And that's kind of a fun reveal. Okay, and finally today for Video Game News with Paul Gale Network, Matt Piscatella over at the NPD group just dropped the August 2021 United States NPD thread on Twitter. I'm not going to go over every category, but I will go over a few. You can always follow Matt Piscatella at Matt Piscatella on Twitter. He's a cool person. I've interacted with him before. And yeah, give him a follow or a like if you're interested in video game hardware, software sales data, and other points of interest in the video game industry in general. Most folks want to know what was the best-selling console of the month. And the best-selling console of the month happened to be Nintendo Switch. Again, now hitting 33 months on the market. I said if it could hit 33 and 34, which would be winning the North American market for the months of August and September, then it will probably uninterruptedly make 35 and 6, which would be November, December, close the year out. 3 years of every single month being the #1 best-selling platform in the United States. Amazing. It has long past beat Xbox 360's 23 months on the market. It beat that a while ago when it did 24, and now it's at 33. It's amazing. All systems are doing well, which is fantastic. But the fact that Nintendo Switch was yet again the #1 best-selling platform is giant. At 10 months in the market, the PlayStation 5 is the fastest selling PlayStation platform in US history, and that's a long 26 history of PlayStation being in the United States. However, it's not the fastest selling system in the United States history in its first 10 months across all platforms. Game Boy Advance and Nintendo Switch, for their first 10 months, launch aligned with PlayStation 5's first 10 months, are actually selling out faster. We'll see at the year mark, once both systems or all three systems have been out for 12 months, who has the fastest first year. But PlayStation 5 still doing very well. Xbox Series X also doing very well. Madden NFL 22 debuted at number 1 for August, and it's already, within that month of August, the 4th best-selling game of the entire 2021 year-to-date. Very impressive. It's the 22nd consecutive year that the Madden NFL franchise has been the best-selling title of its launch month. The last time it wasn't was back in 1999 with WWF Attitude, and that's a long time ago, going back to 99. Ghost of Tsushima was the second best-selling game of the month. It was previously, in the month of July, the 110th best-selling game, and it jumped way up to number 2 because of the director's cut coming out for PS4 and PS5. I played the director's cut all the way through on my PlayStation 5, and oh, what a wonderful game. Sucker Punch delivered. I loved it. It's a fantastic title. If you'd never played it before, it's been out for a year already. It was a good game on PS4, great game on PS4. But if you've never played it, and if you have a PS5, now's the time to pick it up. If you already have a PS4 and you already played it through, platinumed it, loved it, is there enough here? Well, you could just get the Icky expansion, which is worth it. But is it worth it to just like full-on upgrade? Well, I guess you could just upgrade and pay the difference. That's worth it. I guess that's worth it. If you have a PS4 version and you upgrade to the director's cut, that's worth it. You know, it's not like you're spending 60 and then now another 70 and your whole investment is 130. That's not necessarily the case. You know, you're paying the initial 60, buying Icky and the upgrade for 30. That's 90. I think there's $90 worth of content in this if you're someone who played it a year ago and now are upgrading. But definitely a no-brainer. If you don't have it yet, definitely a title that I recommend getting. If you're wondering, I'm going to scroll down the top 20 best-selling games charts. You're not going to see No More Heroes 3, but it came out towards the end and only as a result had a couple of days worth of sales. So it debuted at like 42, if I'm not mistaken. So it just missed the top 20, but also that doesn't include digital because it's on Nintendo. And there's a chance that it might have hit the top 20 if you included digital, but it doesn't. But not a bad debut for only being out for a couple of days and still landing in the top 50 at 42. That's fair. And maybe, like I said, maybe it is in the top 20 if you count digital. But here are the top 20 games across all platforms for August. Madden NFL 22 at number 1, Ghost of Tsushima at 2, Call of Duty Black Ops Cold War at 3, Humankind at 4, Marvel's Spider-Man Miles Morales at 5. That game and 2018 Spider-Man are kind of like PlayStation's Mario Kart and Animal Crossing, you know, or Breath of the Wild. They just have that evergreen feel. A new person buys a PS4 or PS5, more likely a PS5 these days, they're going to pick up Spider-Man because it's an awesome IP, and Insomniac Games made a hell of a good game. It's amazing. At number 6 is Mario Kart 8. At 7 is The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword. Very happy to see it come back in August. And so high. At 8 is Minecraft. 9 is Assassin's Creed Valhalla. Been on here for a while. At 10 is MLB The Show 21. At 11, Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. 12's got Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2019. At 13, another game I'm proud of that's still here. Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart. A terrific one. Also from Insomniac Games. Animal Crossing New Horizons is at 14. Pokemon Sword and Shield at 15. Mortal Kombat 11 at 16. Doing quite well. Only down one spot from last month, and it's been out for over a year. Super Mario 3D World plus Bowser's Fury is at 17. The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild at 18. Mario Golf Super Rush, pardon me, at 19. And Super Mario Party at 20. That's a good, well-rounded list. You have almost half of it being made up by Nintendo. You have some PlayStation and Xbox representation, third parties doing well. It's a healthy time for the video game industry. I'm very happy to see that. If you look at the US NPD 2021 year to date, it's a little bit different. You've got Call of Duty Black Ops Cold War followed by MLB The Show 21, Resident Evil Village, Madden NFL 22, Super Mario 3D World, Marvel's Spider-Man, Miles Morales, Mario Kart 8, Monster Hunter Rise, Minecraft, and Assassin's Creed Valhalla. Like I said, you could look at Matt Piscatella on Twitter and you could see individual breakdowns per console. You can see how much money was being spent in the video game industry for the year. Controller, Xbox Elite Series 2 was the best-selling controller of August. The PlayStation 5 DualSense white version, best-selling accessory of 2021 year to date. Yeah. And then I actually asked Matt on Twitter, considering how long the Xbox 360 record lasted for keeping its #1 position on the market, and Nintendo Switch has passed it several months over now, I wanted to know, does he think that the latter, Nintendo Switch, will eventually be topped? Not for quite some years, I'd imagine. Which is, like, my personal thought that no one's going to beat this for a while. The Xbox 360 held that record for close to a decade. Nintendo Switch came in, not only beat it, but is now, like, far ahead. And he responded, not a whole lot of... Oh, sorry, that was his original point, was not a whole lot of surprises, but ask a question, so I did. His response was, seems like the defining characteristics of consoles may be changing, and what these devices may look like in 10 years will perhaps not be apples to apples. So maybe. So yeah, maybe Nintendo Switch will not be passed for quite some time to come. However, the definition of consoles could change up. And then I went back and, responded that it's true, future consoles could be super smart TVs with built-in video game streaming tech, large SSDs inside, come with a video game controller, and there you go. That's the future of gaming from some company's standpoint. And then you're like, well, is a designated video game console the only thing that could be called a console? Handheld? Tablet? Hybrid? Your phone? What if just a TV comes with it? Obviously, PCs don't get called consoles, but what about tech getting smaller and smaller to the point where it's just a little stick that you're popping in the side of the TV? Oh wait, we already have stuff like that, So that console definition is changing. Could we get to a point where there's something that's so easily accessible, or some little box that becomes your central hub of the whole household, kind of like an Amazon Echo or a Google Nest or something like that, connected to your TV, Roku stick, but just amped up because tech is getting better and better, smaller and smaller, and then you have a video game machine that, like, 300 million people have it. Like, that's just a thing, It could happen. We'll see. But designated video game machines, which we're still at, even though that they also do more, like playing YouTube and Netflix, Disney Plus, and stuff like that. We're still in the era of set video game machines. Nintendo Switch is probably going to keep that record for a long time. All right, that was a pretty meaty video game news day. Happy anniversary to Nintendo GameCube. Great memories. Nice job, Nintendo, on lowering the price of the Nintendo Switch in Europe, UK. Ren and Stimpy coming to Nickelodeon's fighting game. Pretty cool. Matt Piscatella, thank you on Twitter for answering questions and laying out the charts like you always do. It's appreciated. Okay, this is Video Game News with Paul Gale Network signing out. Hope you all have a good one, and I'll see you next time. Take it easy. Bye.